You're not yourself when you're hungry. That's the tagline for one of the most successful ad campaigns of all time, one created for Snickers candy bar. In the Snickers TV commercials, a regular person is transformed temporarily into a celebrity who is ill-suited for whatever activity is happening. For example, a young man playing football with his friends transforms, because he's not himself when he's hungry, into octogenarian actress and comedian Betty White. Yes, Rose from Golden Girls. An African-American rapper transforms into British singer-songwriter and pop icon Elton John. And their friends, realizing that they are not themselves when they are hungry, give them a Snickers, and voila, Betty White transforms back into a football player, Elton John back into a hip-hop artist. And while the wisdom and efficacy of a Snickers bar being the first choice for satisfying nutritional needs is debatable, what is not debatable is that if we are undernourished, we are not ourselves. That's the reason why just about every self-help book, recovery program, or therapeutic relationship out there teaches us the HALT practice. Before we make any big moves or decisions or speak words out of our mouths or out of our fingers on a keyboard, we are advised to halt and make sure that we are not hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. H-A-L-T, halt. Those who teach us this strategy know that nourishment of all kinds has to be attended to before we are good for anything else. And if those basic needs are not met, we are not only not good, we may actually be harmful. And while we recognize and even joke about how we're not ourselves when we're physically hungry, we get hangry, are we as clear about the consequences of being spiritually hungry? Carl Jung wrote of humanity's spiritual needs as being as real as hunger. His words, as real as hunger. Not a secondary need to be addressed when we have time or when we feel like it, but a primary need that must be addressed regularly and faithfully, just as physical hunger is. No one would ever expect to eat a meal, push back from the table, and say, good job, got that done for the week, yay me. No, that's absurd. We know that. It's not a one and done. But I wonder if we might be doing a spiritual version of exactly that. Perhaps coming to church on Sunday, listening, nodding. Yes, yes. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. Got it, got it, got it. Yes. Good. Done for the week. Doesn't work like that. Not a one and done. In John chapter 6, Jesus tells the crowd point blank, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And then Jesus goes on to say more, much, much more, extending the bread of life metaphor for 30 plus verses. And in the middle of this long discourse, he stops to take a breath, and his disciples turn to one another and say, this teaching is difficult. And I love this moment, and it makes me laugh every time I read it, because this teaching is difficult. I feel your pain, my brothers. This gospel is trying so hard to get us to see something that we may not be jazzed about recognizing. That how and if we choose to nourish ourselves, it matters. What we choose to consume matters. Because we cannot be ourselves if we are spiritually hungry. Dr. Andrew Weil, Harvard-educated physician and pioneer of integrative medicine, has written persuasively of our need to broaden our ideas of nutrition beyond what we eat. In writing about the need for good nutrition, he says, and I'm quoting, "I have given you many suggestions about diet, about nourishing your body. I think it is useful to broaden the concept of nutrition to include what we put into our consciousness as well. Many people do not exercise much control over that, and as a result, take in a lot of mental junk food." Our world makes it awfully easy to indulge in junk food for the body, and it makes it equally easy to indulge in junk for the spirit. Are we nourishing ourselves each and every day in whatever ways help connect us to spirit? Be it prayer, meditation, reading, writing, physical movement, creative expression, being in nature, being in community, serving others. Or are we stuffing ourselves with spiritual junk food? Do we overindulge, for example, in echo chamber media sites that purport to inform us but are actually inflaming us, overstimulating us with inflammatory rhetoric, scare headlines, muck-raking, pot-stirring, fault-finding, all masquerading as journalism? Or maybe we spend our time eating from our own private garden of poisoned fruit, our disappointment, our irritation, our frustration, our envy, our self-aggrandizement, feeding our basest wants, but failing to nourish our most basic need. We gobble up these empty spiritual calories until our spirits are so jacked up on junk, we can't even think, much less feel. Numbed, self-righteous, and scattered, we go out into the world starved to death, and we think we are following Christ. And you'll notice, I hope, that the pronoun I'm using here is we, because, oh yes, I have helped myself to the all-you-can-eat buffet of spiritual junk food more than once. And y'all, nothing has ever brought me and those who had the misfortune to be around me, nothing has ever brought as much sorrow as the decisions I made, the actions I undertook, and the words that I spoke when I was spiritually hungry. Are we nourishing ourselves? Do we recognize in our hearts and minds and live out in our daily lives the unflinching reality that our collect of the day, which Father Jared led us through at the beginning of the service, the idea that this collect makes plain our need for God? Do we strive, as this collect had us pray, to do always those things that are right and acknowledge that we cannot exist without God? Not if we are to be the people that God calls us to be. Today we come together to baptize a beautiful child of God, Levi Teal Cone. And in so doing, we will renew our own baptismal covenant. We will again promise to do everything we can to support this precious child and family in their lives in Christ. This most beautiful and sacred of pledges we cannot do, however, if we are spiritually undernourished. We cannot live fully into our part of the baptismal covenant if we are not doing what we know to be right, if we are not fully cognizant in mind and heart and spirit that we cannot exist as the people of God that God has created us to be without the bread of life, without the God who creates us, the God who transforms us, and the God